Well, we're still in lockdown here in the UK, and it's cold outside, and it's raining. But I'm on a Zoom call with Pete, so that's good. It's time for another Constant Geekery podcast.
Well, score me using some dubious benchmarks, slap on a sticker, and call me an Intel Evo.
That's a very specific riposte, Pete. So, of course, in doing your little comedy comeback there at the start, Pete, you gave away the main topic for our podcast this evening, which
yes, indeed.
we will come to in a moment. But first of all, I have a drink.
What are you drinking tonight, Dave?
Well, I got myself about half a bottle of vodka.
Oh, very nice.
No, it's not. It's just water. I've as those viewing on the YouTubes will be able to see, I'm wearing a sling because I had a procedure on my shoulder last week, and I've had many medications, Pete. And so drinking whiskey is not the preferred solution, which is a disappointment for you, I know, because you were hoping I'd be scrabbling around the dark and dingy recesses of my drinks cabinet to find something vile to drink.
I was, but my patience is long and I can wait. Would you like to know what I'm drinking?
Yes, please.
I've got a flask of Vimto.
Is that fizzy Vimto, Pete?
No, it's still Vimto, and it's sugar-free.
Sort of. What's the point, Vimto, then?
It's quite tasty, actually. Don't knock it till you've tried it, Mr. I've got a glass of water.
Okay. Good. Well, in view of the fact that I am in some discomfort, this is going to be a shorter podcast this evening, but there is something that we wanted to talk about, which we will get to. But it's basically we're going to talk in a little bit more detail about the subject of the video that I posted on the main channel this week, so youtube.com/constantgeekery. Main channel, incidentally, that's knocking on the door of 12,500 subs now, Pete.
Woohoo! Yeah, thanks so much. That's so great. Well done.
I don't know how many of the new subscribers are joining the podcast. Probably haven't done a very good job of advertising the podcast, but I had a lot to think about and I can't remember everything. And I'm getting old.
You had a lot on your mind, and it's a niche. It's a niche. Not everyone wants to listen to me. They want to listen to you, really.
People want to definitely see you eat, it would seem, Pete. This seems to be quite a phenomenon. But
yeah, I don't know why, but it does seem to be a large proportion of the podcast comments are now around either what I'm going to eat or my reaction to what I have eaten.
And I assume that you are going to eat something tonight, Pete.
I have got something ready, yes.
Look forward to that then. First of all, though, do you have any comments that we would like to share?
So, again, thanks for all the Pete's Eat suggestions. Big shout out to Chris Adams. You've given me a couple of ideas, which we will definitely look at, not just the recipes, but how we go about that in future episodes. So, sounds good. We'll try that soon. Video Boy, I think it is, or Video Boy. Glad you enjoyed my suffering. Actually went from listening to the podcast on Google to YouTube just so he could see my face when I ate a peanut butter and pickle sandwich. So, moving on from Pete's Eats things, though, a really nice comment from Guy Jones about the fact that this balance between M1 and PC, which obviously we're going to extend a bit more tonight, is that a lot of people are forgetting that they're comparing M1 chips, which are essentially entry-level chips, to i7s or i9s, which are struggling to come anywhere close to the M1 in a lot of areas, whereas the Intel equivalent in terms of price point and target is an i3 or an i5. So I thought that was a really salient point there from Guy, and he enjoyed the podcast. So thanks for listening, Guy, and hopefully thanks for subscribing too. Also, Casper S, talking about Chromebooks, agreed with us that not really great for education. He set his dad up with one, but it wasn't great. Like the shout on the ThinkPad, so I've got a trusty Lenovo X220 that some on YouTube may see behind me here this evening, just to prove that I'm not a PC hater. Oh, it's all there.
A nice venerable old ThinkPad there, Pete.
Yeah, it's. I say what, they hold up well. They are solid, well-engineered machines.
They do. I've got to say, actually, when it comes to education with the Chromebooks, Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think here in the UK that's not really a thing, is it? I mean, my boys are
What
taught.
education?
Well, yeah, my boys are taught from home, so they do get an education. But I'm not aware what they're using in school. But I don't think it's Chromebook.
No,
I could be wrong.
iPads are quite common, but my children have left school, so because as you like to point out, I am older than you.
You are.
Yeah, it didn't take me as long to find a suitable mate. Don't know if that should stay in or not.
That is so staying in. Oh, that's great. Next time I see your wife, Pete, I shall address her as your suitable mate. She'll love
Excellent. Darren Crowler made the point that he's got the M1 MacBook Air with the 8 gig, and he's had no problems rendering 4K video from his Sony A73. He does admit that most of the videos are around about 16 minutes, and it does sometimes bottleneck, but if he leaves it for a minute and come back, it's fine again.
But that will be H.264.
It is H.264 on an A73 by default, so we'd expect good performance. We've not tried iMovie, actually, have we? It's probably a fairer test of the MacBook Air's target usage over Final Cut Pro. I wouldn't expect it to be a particular challenge using the Sony.
No, and I think some people misunderstand us on this. If you're working with H.264 footage and you're just doing, straightforward video editing, cutting one video stream and splicing in a couple of other bits, yeah, M1's got you covered. You'll be fine with an M1. What we were talking about, when we're getting it to slow down, is working with, more heavy codecs, so B-RAW, for example, and using multiple streams of it, layering up stuff with transparency and effects and other things, color grades, LUTs. As soon as you start chucking all of that stuff in, you will find that, at the end, it's just not got enough RAM. But we keep going around in circles on this, saying the same thing. So, let's move on.
I think Darren was just saying that in his experience it was good, and he's using it exactly as it was intended. So really pleased about that, Darren. Thank you. So some really good comments there. Please keep them coming. Please keep some suggestions coming on what you'd like us to talk about, not just what you'd like to see me stuff down my throat. And look forward to seeing what you think this week.
So a couple of tech highlights that you've picked one out, I picked one out. So a highlight for me this week will be Blackmagic Design have an event on Wednesday. So this is 6 p.m. UK time. I will be tuning in to find out what's going on. So if you're not familiar...
Can I join you for that?
Yeah, sure. Maybe we'll film it if there's anything useful coming out of it. Maybe do a special. I don't know what it is. It might just be a fairly low key affair. They might be launching new kit. They say specifically they're talking about the A10 Mini and the cameras. So for those who, and excuse me tonight, my throat is still quite sore from having a tube stuffed down it.
You get off with. You don't need to apologise at all tonight, buddy. You soldier on. Yeah, Blackmagic. If you're not familiar with the company, they bought Resolve. When we say DaVinci Resolve, that's now a Blackmagic Design product, and they also make cameras. They make all sorts of other professional kit for video production, live broadcasting. We use some of their kit within our own business. I use some of their kit for AV events and stuff, or at least I used to. I really like their approach. I really like the simplicity and the cleanness of the interface on their cameras. I love the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. I think they're a great company, and they're really trying to sort of push on. And Resolve is just a fantastic piece of software for video editing. And I'm also loving my new Speed Editor keyboard as well, just getting used to that. So bring a video on that to the channel at some point if you're interested. But we like Blackmagic Design because they do interesting stuff with video. Interested to see what they'll be doing with the cameras, and particularly this A10 Mini product. So if you like to watch live streams on YouTube, then you'll almost certainly have benefited from the A10 products.
of Blackmagic. So they just make it really easy to sync up lots of different types of video, do a live broadcast. And we have toyed with the idea ourselves, haven't we, Pete? Doing some live stuff.
Yes, we have.
Don't know what you guys would think about that. Whether you would join us for some live broadcast action, but let us know in the comments. Obviously,
please.
Needs to wait until we can get back in that in our office and studio. But we'll see what happens. Obviously, we'll report back next week if there's anything interesting from that particular event. What did you had something of interest as well, Pete?
Yeah, I'm a sucker for expensive, cool gear, as you know. Bang & Olufsen have brought out the Beosound Level, which is a battery-powered wireless speaker, of which there are many. Sonos are probably really well known for that. Apple, of course, have got their entries in the market, and many others besides. Looks amazing, although quite impractical, unless you wall mount it, which costs in an Apple-esque move an extra £99 over the base price. That's English pounds. How much do you think for a B&O wireless speaker in this country, would you say, Dave? Thinking when you got Sonos is around about the $450 mark for the really good ones.
So is this proper old school Bang & Olufsen pricing, or are we talking about B&O sticking their logo onto HP laptops or whatever it is?
No. This is a proper B&O product.
Well, it's going to be more than the Sonos then.
Correct. How much more would you say?
Well, unfortunately, Pete, you've put the amount in the notes, so I can see it in front of me.
Yeah, but they don't know that.
Oh, sorry, I was supposed to do a guess. I don't know, Pete. I probably
hang on. Just erase your mind for the last 10 seconds. How much would you guess, Dave?
I'm just going to hazard a wild guess, Pete, based on my, extensive experience with these things. I'm going to go with, say, maybe £1,299, something along those lines.
That is astonishingly close. Yeah, very good. 1,299 English pounds, which is a huge sum of money for a wireless speaker. Mm-hmm. However, it does look awesome. It is engineered to the quality that you'd expect, and it has awesome sound. But that's not what I'm interested in. This is what I'm interested in. So this speaker has superb sound quality, as you'd expect. But what's one of the problems with anything that you get these days, including the watches on our wrists and our phones and everything? What's the problem with them?
We've got too much of it. I don't know, Pete. I'm probably not entirely on your wavelength here.
No, okay. Software updates, get slower. What eventually happens?
Well, so it becomes obsolete.
Is this an Amiga? Exactly, it becomes obsolete. Bang & Olufsen have made it so that you can not only replace the battery on this thing, Apple, but you can also, they front-loaded the technology that drives the streaming, so it does all the latest stuff, and it's overpowered so that new updates don't slow it down. But crucially, you can remove that and put a new one in, so that at some point in the future, when your Uber wireless speaker can no longer drive the codecs of the day, you just put a new module in, but you've still got the amazing speakers and enclosure.
That's great. That's a really nice idea,
isn't it?
Yeah.
Both from a sustainability and environmental point of view, but also, just thinking about your customers. Well, they'll probably go bust.
It's just great. We live in a throwaway society, and it drives me up the wall. I could do with some new soles and heels on my shoes, and the price of getting that done is more expensive than buying new shoes. And this is the society that we live in. So do I go and get my shoes repaired, or do I just buy a new pair off Amazon and chuck these out? We're always making those decisions, but it doesn't seem like that long ago. When I first started work in the 90s, I used to go and get my shoes repaired. That was a normal thing to do. So even just in the last 25 years, things have really changed. And technology is the worst for it.
Oh. Have you seen that Samsung, having initially derided the concept that Apple weren't shipping chargers with their phone and said, our next phone will have one in. Now their next phone doesn't.
Excellent. Do you suppose that's because they've seen all of the number of new chargers that Apple's been selling in addition to its phones?
Yeah.
I'm having a laugh. That's a tongue-in-cheek comment, dear listeners. I don't want to start that argument all over again.
Just blame it on the drugs that you've not had.
Let's move into our main topic of the week, shall we, Pete?
Let's do it.
So, Intel have been on quite an aggressive marketing spin of late. If you've had a look on Twitter, we're going to talk about their ads on Twitter in a little bit, but they're quite aggressively suggesting that the M1 is not what Apple claim it to be. And so I decided to make a video about this, which you can go and enjoy on the main channel. But Pete, you've watched the video. You've got some thoughts about what Intel are claiming. So let me just give a quick bit of background for the listeners. So Intel brought out the Evo platform, which is a series of, 25 standards that a laptop must meet in order to qualify as being an Evo laptop. And this includes things like it needs to switch on in under a second when you open it up. It's got to have 9+ hours of battery life. It's got a
razor thin bezels.
Yeah, they've actually specified razor thin bezels. Can you believe it? It's got to have an 11th gen Intel Core CPU, Iris X graphics. I forget some of the other things, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that the Intel Evo has to have. And generally speaking, this is a great idea because what it means is a level of consistency and quality. In if you're going out to buy a PC and it's got this particular label on it, then you know you're getting a certain standard. So quite like that. However, what Intel then went on to say is, well, Apple's MacBook Pro fails 8 of these 25 tests, therefore it doesn't qualify as an Evo laptop. And what's more, here are some benchmarks that we've selected. So let me hand over to you, Pete, just to get, what's your take on this?
Well, I mean, obviously Apple are way out of the blocks in this area at the moment. And it has taken months for Intel to respond. And I was thinking, if it was a really convincing response, or attack, as some are calling it, but if it was like, oh yeah, actually, there's some really good things here. And just to be clear, there are some good things with the Evo standard, and you point them out in the video that they are, in some cases, using real-world stuffs to benchmark it, which is what we've been saying all along. Benchmark against stuff you're actually doing rather than some nebulous number. But, like I said, if they spent their time putting this together and it comes out and it's an absolutely devastating attack, then great. But what they've come up with feels at best half-baked. It almost seems like, it feels weak, a bit disingenuous. Like if you remember at school, someone would sort of say a withering thing and the other person would go, well, you're a little poo-poo head. Do you know what I mean? It just feels like that kind of like, we've got to say something. Apple getting all the limelight. So they've come out with, this set of decks, which are, it just feels like a company that feels threatened. And they're just comparing things differently.
Yeah, I don't understand why they feel threatened though, Pete. Intel is an enormous corporation. And despite what everybody is saying, if you read the comments on YouTube, you'd assume Intel is dead and buried. It absolutely is not. They are making more money than ever. They're doing fine. Apple is a tiny percentage of the computer market. They don't have a huge cut of it. I'd say AMD are a much bigger threat to Intel. Although, of course, Intel have been attacking AMD as well, but that's for another day. But I don't understand why they should feel threatened, and I don't really understand the angle that they're taking with this either, because it doesn't even make sense. There are still Apple machines that you can go and buy today from Apple that have Intel chips in them.
Yeah.
And this is all directed not at just M1, it's directed at Mac. So let me just bring in the silly adverts, which they've posted on Twitter.
I love these.
It's something like, and I haven't actually got them up in front of me to read it, but it's something about if you can launch a rocket and then launch a game of Rocket League, you're not on a Mac. That's one of theirs.
That was it.
So basically what they're trying to say is if you're some kind of rocket scientist launching rockets, you're going to be on a PC, not a Mac, which is actually nonsense.
I was just going to say, someone in the Twitter response had just pointed out an M1 emulating a PC running Rocket League at 60 FPS, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
And then a picture of some kind of NASA meeting, and they're all on Mac.
I know. I say that. And then there's, what was this other one? If you're browsing through your Photoshop thumbnails with your thumb, then you're not using a Mac. It's like, I don't want to touch my laptop screen. When are people going to get this? I totally understand. I've had a touchscreen laptop before. I almost never use the touchscreen. I know there are people out there who like a touchscreen laptop, and that's fine. If that's what you like, that's great. But most designers, particularly those who have a Photoshop persuasion, do not like putting greasy thumbprints on their laptop screen. Yeah, it's like those meetings that we had, Pete. And you get clients who they'll sort of like they'll lean in and touch your screen, and you're sort of like you're inching you keep inching your notebook back across the table, don't you? Or jab it with their pen. Oh, it's just yeah.
Do you know what? Funny story actually, talking about touch screen PCs and things like that. Someone we both know was in one of the PC stores here in the UK. This was probably about 8 or 9 years ago when touchscreen PCs, all-in-ones particularly, were becoming a thing. And he was looking around the store with his wife, and he was going up to just random monitors and touching them and pretending to use them like a touchscreen. And then his wife was coming behind them, wondering why they didn't work for her. You know who it is.
Oh, joyous.
Brilliant joke.
So, anyway, the point I was going to make with this is, what the heck has a touchscreen got to do with Intel's CPU?
Nothing.
What does touchscreen technology have to do with the M1 versus Intel Core i7 debate, or the Mac versus PC debate? Right.
Do you know what it feels like to me?
Go on.
Maybe this is a concluding comment, but I'm going to say it now. It feels like a company comparing an EV car to a combustion car. And they essentially do the same job. They get you from A to B. A Mac or an Intel laptop essentially do the same things. They're a computer. The EV's the future, but currently we know it has limitations, and there's things that if you're buying one, you need to educate yourself on before you get it, or you might be disappointed.
That's actually it's a good analogy, and we do like a car analogy on the Constant Geekery podcast, and indeed a sandwich analogy from time to time. But let me take your car analogy. Because Intel has missed the point here. They're trying to defend the indefensible, if you like. They're trying to say that their chip is faster than the M1, and it demonstrably isn't. I mean, it is for some things, but for most things, you'll find the M1 is faster. Sorry, folks, if you're of Intel fanboys or whatever, that's just the truth of the matter. That the M1 is good. But here's my point when it comes to cars. A fast car is not a better car just because it's faster. You can go out and buy a fast car, but that doesn't mean that it's better than a family car. Or if you
depends what you're using it for.
Exactly. If you live on a farm, you probably want a 4-wheel drive, don't you? It's not very fast. And this is the point that Intel need to really get to grips with, I think, rather than do these silly kind of childish lashing out and this stupid marketing campaigns. What they need to do is say, actually, here's what our chips are really good at, and here's what you can expect from it. Because I put it to you, Pete, that the M1 has got really fast single core performance, and this is evidence when you go to open up an app like Safari. What's the experience?
Oh, it's lightning.
Yeah, it's immediate. So suppose Apple tomorrow go out and make their chip 50% faster for single core, right? What difference are you going to notice?
I'm sure it's going to increase my productivity by 50% when using Safari.
I'm sure it won't. You just this is the point, isn't it? You just won't notice those differences. So it kind of gets to a point where the speed becomes a little bit irrelevant. And this cycles back to what you were saying about, what's the point in focusing in on benchmark numbers? So I support this idea of doing real world performance testing. And it seems to me with this slide deck, we sort of started out looking at the productivity tests and the web expert tests. Okay, fair enough, they run faster in Safari, but Intel only showed the Chrome results. But nonetheless, it does seem that their top of the range 1185 G7 CPU is indeed faster than the M1 for some of those tasks. And that's great. Great news. Great news for PC buyers. We'd be the first to say that. We'd like to see competition.
Definitely.
They then they show some Office tasks as well that seem to run considerably quicker on the Intel CPU. But what's your experience been with Office on the M1, Pete? I know what mine has been, but I'm just curious about yours.
When it's not been dependent on outside sources, like, for example, Outlook using internet and the internet speed, that kind of thing, it's been buttery, I think is the term we've both used, buttery smooth. It's been really nice. Particularly, I've seen the contrast actually this week just gone, using my MacBook Pro 16 for some fairly heavy spreadsheet work, some reporting work that I've been doing for a client. And it's noticeably laggier on the MacBook Pro 16. And to the point where I was seriously thinking, shall I go and get the MacBook Air and all the peripherals and all that and use that? I didn't in the end, but that's mainly just because it's downstairs and I'm lazy, not because it wouldn't have been a better experience. I was close to it. I nearly finished by the time I started thinking that.
And this is it, you and I just sort of going back the last, I don't know, 5-6 years, but we've had Surface Pros, we've had Dell XPS, I've had an HP Spectre laptop, we've had the MacBook Pros, MacBook Air, we've been using iPad, all the rest of it, and I've got to say, the M1 Mac and indeed the iPad, do incredibly well in Office. So it feels to me like for Intel to find these particular things that run so much faster on its chip, either the chip is genuinely a lot better, and I haven't personally tested it, so I can't answer that, or it's the case that they picked a few benchmarks that make the difference. But truth be told, again, if you're using an Excel sheet and it's not getting in your way, will you actually notice the difference? If someone turned around and said to you, this is now running 50% faster, is that going to change the speed with which you can load up the columns of figures, or...
Well, this is it. There comes a point where the human experience, the processor may be doing things beyond our comprehension of speed as a human being quicker. But there comes a point where we aren't going to be able to notice it. I mean, I think we were talking about the 8K VR glasses last week and saying, at what point does the eye, does it get beyond the eye's ability to process the level of detail at that range? And it's the same thing here. At what point it doesn't matter how fast the machine is going, because it's always going to be faster than your perception of what it's doing.
Yeah, and for that reason, you probably could go and buy one of these Intel Evo machines, and even if it is slower than the M1, it won't matter because you'll never notice. And the biggest single factor that you'll notice in terms of laptop speed, I would say, is the SSD drive. That's been the biggest change to the speed of computing in the last 10 years. It's night and day. It's incredible the difference that an SSD makes over a traditional hard drive. But I don't think as many people have noticed just the raw horsepower of the computer increasing. But there's this temptation all the time to dip into the benchmarks. And, something I brought out in the video, I did show the Geekbench 5 benchmarks, and the 1185 G7, which is the quad-core i7 that Intel are comparing with the M1, just does not score close to the M1. It's considerably behind. But when you go into something like Cinebench, which is more of a very specific real world test, you find in that particular test the gap narrows. In fact, the Intel chip is slightly faster for single threaded. And this is because Geekbench is a multi-purpose benchmark that comprises lots of different tests, some of which run faster and some of which run slower. Whereas Cinebench is a lot more focused. And so there will always be focused areas where a particular CPU will do better than it would apparently appear that it might based on a benchmark figure. And that's why you can't just look at benchmarks and come to a conclusion about stuff. You really can't. So I said it several times in the video, and I say it again, I do not doubt for one moment that the 1185 G7 can outperform the M1 in certain tasks. Don't doubt that at all. What I take issue with is Intel's attitude towards it. And you could almost say that first sort of slide with the productivity benchmarks was fair enough. But then we go into the content creation benchmarks. What a load of nonsense. What's Intel thinking of?
Well, they've cherry-picked, haven't they? They've cherry-picked things that show the 11th generation processor as being superior to M1. But, you know, if they were using standard benchmarks, which we've already established are nebulous anyway, but we know that the M1 would outperform them. It's not going to go in Intel's favour. So it's kind of damning that they've had to cherry-pick certain benchmarks in order to put a pseudo-credible case together.
Yeah, I think they shoot themselves in the foot with this kind of behaviour. You know, they did the Topaz tests, for example, and those Topaz apps don't run on M1 natively. So the M1's running it through Rosetta without any machine learning emulation. And these are AI tools. So unsurprisingly, they run faster on Intel. And actually, I suspect they still would run faster on Intel, even if Topaz was native for M1, but the margin of difference would be rather different. Testing the Photoshop's content aware fill as well, which is another AI tool, and it's not supported in the beta that runs on the M1. What's the point of that? And then Lightroom Classic, which is again not supported on the M1, and Intel is claiming wins for software that doesn't even run on the M1.
Still in beta yet. I think that's the key. You know, it doesn't run on it natively yet, but it's in development, and you know, Apple really have only just started the transition, and with more MacBooks coming with M chips inside them, things are only going to improve from here. And at some point, when those pieces of software are properly released for Apple Silicon, they're just going to wipe the floor with them.
Well, just to be clear as well, you know, Lightroom 4.1 is out for the M1, but they chose to use Lightroom Classic.
Yeah, exactly. It's cherry picking.
Now, some people would say, well, this is what the point Intel's making here is that there is some software that's not available yet. But it's like, well, if that's the case, they need to grow up, because, you know, this is a new transition to a new platform. Of course, there's going to be stuff that doesn't work yet. You know, everybody knows that. Nobody's denying that. The vast majority of stuff does work and runs at an acceptable pace, even through Rosetta. And the rest of it, like you just said, is going to come. So it's a nonsense argument. So I thought that was really disingenuous of Intel, and they, you know, I thought it was pathetic, if I'm honest.
Yeah, and muddying the waters with things that are nothing to do with chips or even the M1. You know, so things like saying, oh, compared to a PC, the M1 doesn't have enough ports, or they're not good for gaming, they don't have touchscreen displays. It's like, well, that's true of any Apple laptop of a recent generation, you know. So what point are you trying to make, and who are you trying to make it to? Yeah, disingenuous is the way. What I would say, though, is if you are in the market for a Windows laptop, then the Intel Evo Standard is probably the best alternative to an M1 Mac. It's a good guide of a good machine.
It is. I would say that, you know, the Zen 3 AMD chips will be better, but they are also unobtainium at the moment. You can't. There's like a story of everything in it. You just can't get hold of it. I know there are some waiting lists. It's somewhere in the world for the M1. Some places do, but in the UK you can get an M1 without any problem at all. Pretty rapid. Yeah. In fact, we'll pop a link to Amazon in the description. But Amazon have got deals on at the moment on the M1 MacBook Pro. I think it's quite a bit off. So, you know,
So just feel free to click on the link
and we get about 5p, I think.
help.
So, it's just a bit sad, and I didn't enjoy the bait and switch either. And you know, when they came to the battery test, suddenly we're not comparing a MacBook Pro anymore; it's the MacBook Air, which everyone knows doesn't
Sneaky.
last as long. Not only that, Pete, but the MacBook Air has got a lot more pixels on its screen than the laptop that they're comparing it to. And Intel conveniently didn't make any mention of that.
No, but then, you know, just for the sake of balance, let's be clear that when Apple launched the M1 machines, they were doing lots of, you know, 50% or 90% faster than the leading Windows laptop or what have you, without any substantiation. And their brightness test was based. They didn't even use nits, did they? They just said 8 up from the bottom. It's like, oh, that old standard, yeah.
It is daft. Yeah.
So Apple can also be a bit disingenuous, but on this occasion, I think this is, it's pretty poor from Intel, and it, like you said, that they're not going anywhere, but they must be feeling threatened by this. And of course, you know, Samsung and Qualcomm, they're all bringing out new ARM chips. Microsoft are looking to look at, you know, Windows on ARM a bit more aggressively. So perhaps strategically, long term, they are feeling a bit rattled, and they just want to just sort of try and cement the market share they've got. Who knows? Who knows what's going on behind the scenes? What do you guys think?
Yeah. Well, someone left a comment saying that Intel have bought or placed a massive order with TSMC for the 3nm process, which is true. Yeah. They have. I don't know when that's supposed to be for, 2022 or 23. But Apple got their order in for 3nm before Intel, so I'd expect to see the Apple chips before. But that's quite a leap for Intel, you know, going outside of their own foundry to get around the problem that they've got with fabrication. I have no doubt that Intel can bring something strong to the party, just like AMD are. You know, all of these guys who are saying x86 is dead, ARM is the future. Well, that may be true. I don't know, but I don't think that ARM at this point in time is killing off x86. You know, there's plenty of room in the market.
That dog.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we would like to see these guys, you know, bring some fight. And that's what we want to see. We want to see bring some fight. Shout about what's good about your product instead of trying to denigrate someone else's efforts. It just makes you look cheap, sad, churlish, pathetic, all of those terms that we can think of. And it's so beneath Intel. It really is. You know, they don't need to be doing any of that stuff.
No, they've got an amazing legacy, and let's face it, you know, they've given us in the geek world a lot over the years. And we don't hate Intel any more than we hate Apple. We don't dislike their corporate behaviour some of the time, but it's just the behaviour of corporates, I suppose.
Well, it's all a bit silly, and you know, we need to see better from you, Intel. And not that Intel are likely to be listening to middle-aged British guys waffle on about their stuff on a podcast, but nonetheless, if you are listening, Intel, sort your life out. This is pathetic behaviour. We're not school children, you know. You can do some good stuff, so do the good stuff and shout about what's good. And just a word of caution to finish this topic, and that is, if you are going out to buy an Intel Evo laptop, just bear in mind that there's a whole selection of CPUs available, including i3s, which are definitely nowhere near the M1. So Pete's expression there, quite amusing. I don't think you knew that. So
I did not know that.
Intel has been comparing their very best to...
This has got an i5 in it.
Well, I suspect it's a different i5, in fairness. We'll have to talk about that another time.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll talk about it another time, how an i5 and an i3 and an i7 are not quite so different as you think they might be. In any case, there is a lot of variation within the Evo platform. Intel has chosen its very best CPU to compare against the M1, which is Apple's entry-level CPU. So let's just be super clear about that.
Let's keep it real.
So I don't think you're going to save any money either, going with one of these 1185 G7s. So I suspect it will cost you every bit as much as an M1, if not more.
To be fair, and again, just for the sake of balance, there are some really nice designs out there if you are in the market for a Windows laptop. The Asus ZenBook, the Razer Book 13, all really, really nice. And there are things that, are really good about those machines. But
yeah, Asus have got some particularly exciting. I'm very excited about the Zephyrus G14. Once they put the Zen 3 chips in, I think at the moment that's about April time for launch. But you're talking about a 14-inch notebook, a gaming notebook with a proper RTX card in it, and an 8-core AMD Zen 3 CPU, but in a chassis that's, it's not an ugly chassis. It's a nice looking thing, and I do think that the PC manufacturers are bringing something to the table. So, I'm hopefully going to try and get my hands on one of those some way or another. Just need to get the subscribers up on the channel, and then Asus might start sending me samples for review, Pete.
And Razer might send me some samples for review. Who knows?
Yeah, so help us out, folks. If you'd like to see that content, you need to subscribe to our channel and get us noticed so we can get some review samples. And anyone who wants to send us a review sample, we'll be glad to send it back again. So if there's anything you want us to test, we'll do that and send it back.
Yeah.
Talking of sending stuff, we did a bit of a rough job of announcing a competition last week, Pete, and I don't think everyone understood the.
And it was rough because we made it up during the podcast.
Okay, so here's what's on offer, folks. What is on offer is a Chromebook. Now, before you get your hopes up, I'm pretty sure we spent about £210 on it. So it is
2 years ago, nearly.
It's a very cheap Chromebook. In fairness, it hasn't been used, though, for much other than one video. So we will indeed post that out to you anywhere in the world within reason, as long as it's not going to cost us a ludicrous amount of money to do it. We'll send that out to you. But here's what you need to do. On our Zoom podcast, we've got the images of Pete and I, and then in the background, there's some subtle movement going on in the kind of purple background. So you need to tell us what is happening in that video. And the video has appeared on my channel. It has been used on my channel. That's all I'm going to say. So if whoever can get closest to it, and we'll keep on taking entries until someone gets close enough to it that we can award the prize. How does that sound? Is that reasonable? Yeah. And you can then indeed have the Chromebook, or if you would prefer us to donate it somewhere, you can do that. Or if you would prefer us to smash it up on the channel, we'll do that as well with some glee, I should imagine. Whatever you want.
We'll find innovative ways to destroy a Chromebook on the podcast channel.
And Pete will stuff in a peanut butter and pickle sandwich for you as well.
What, to the Chromebook? Yeah, I'll happily do that.
Okay, so if you want to enter that competition, what you need to do is send us an email to podcast@constantgeekery.com. There we go. So that's the competition. We won't run it forever. We'll pick a winner at some point. But let's get a few more guesses in first, because everyone is way off at the moment. I'll tell you that much. Way off.
It's not immediately obvious what it is, to be fair.
No. So I think what we'll do, we're going to have the Pete Eats section, but I don't know if does everybody watch Pete Eats? I mean, what we've been doing is saying goodbye to everyone and then doing Pete Eats and then saying goodbye to everyone again. So I'm not going to do that today. We're just going to go straight into Pete Eats. And if you don't want to watch Pete eat something, fast forward.
Stop now.
So Pete, I'm curious, and I this is the one thing I know nothing about. What are you going to eat?
Well, after last week's frankly vile, disgusting thing, and I have put out a hit on that subscriber, I'm going with, I think it was Joel that suggested this, and this was what I was trying to do last week.
Oh,
so I have got...
Sprinkles.
I've got sprinkles. There you go. Rainbow sprinkles. Probably not focusing in because it's focused on my face. And I have a slice of bread.
Okay, so
You might be able to see there's butter on that bread.
obviously, if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify or something, you won't be able to see these things. You just have to use your imagination, or slip on over to youtube.com/The Constant Geekery Podcast.
Yeah, and that's the sound of sprinkles.
Excellent.
Now, what I'm going to do this hopefully just. Can you see that as well? Okay.
Yeah. That is a loaded slice of bread with sprinkles. And I've got to warn you, you're going to need to move quick on this, Pete, because my camera's down to 10% battery.
Right, okay. I'm rolling it up into some kind of pocket.
I feel that you've been quite kind to yourself this week. Let's be honest, Pete. Go on, stuff it in. God, he's gone for it as well. That is a good sized mouthful. How's that working out for you? There's a measure of confusion. No, now Pete is nodding. He's nodding. I don't think it's the nicest thing you've ever eaten.
No, it's not. But you know, it's all right.
Well,
It's very crunchy.
I feel it's a disappointment. I'll be honest, Pete. After last week, I'd prefer to see you in a measure of pain over this. And I think I speak for all the viewers when I say that.
Well, there is the fried egg Tabasco sauce and mustard sandwich, which I might try next week. Unless something better comes in on the suggestions, you can put them in the comments, or you can email podcast@constantgeekery.com.
Constant
And
conquery.
we'll look at all of them.
So, Pete, I also have something for you to eat next week. A special prize. I'm going to order it from Amazon. I'm going to have it sent to your door. You're not allowed to open it until the podcast, at the point in which we're going to eat it.
I am being stitched up, folks. Are you allowed to drink next week?
I might be able to. Depends how much pain I'm in and whether or not I need to take some drugs all of a sudden,
Okay.
so I don't have to.
So, can I just say, who thinks that I should get Dave a drink to drink next week if he's going to give me something to eat? And again, suggestions on that, pop them in the comments.
I'll be honest with you, I don't think that it's not going to be something that's unpleasant to eat. But that is all I'm going to say.
It's going to be seafood, isn't it?
I'm not saying anything. Not saying anything at all. Look, Pete, I've taken you on some culinary adventures. Could you believe this, folks, that Pete had never had a rack of ribs? I took him out one day and we had a rack of ribs, and he almost wept.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
He almost
I'll
wept.
give you that.
It was quite a moment. And for those of a vegetarian persuasion, then sorry about that. But it was very good. So thanks for eating sprinkles on bread, Pete.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. That's really enhanced my life.
I imagine you'll be rushing to go and do that again.
Well, I've still got, like 3/4 of a tube left, so I'll just go and finish those off a bit later.
Excellent. Good. Well, thank you, everybody, for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for your comments and engagement. Always enjoy hearing what you've got to say. Thanks for tuning in for another Constant Geekery podcast. Sorry about my croaky voice. And, well, I'm sure we'll get some kind of tech news together and possibly food delights for next week, Pete.
It's a podcast of variety and wonder.
I'll see you again next time, folks, for the Constant Geekery podcast.
Cheerio.